Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 128 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're taking a look at some of the top performing deck lists from week one of Whispers in the Well. I'm Zach Bivens today, third place at the Disney Lorcana World Champion. We have the very handsome Thiago to my right. Sky is looking like he's in a bit of a different location. And Kawa grew a lot of hair and a beard. So, yeah, we're having fun. You guys know who we are, and I'm super excited to talk about some of the best performing decks from set 10 so far. So I want to pass it over to you first, Sky, because you actually played in a set 10 release event this weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was down in Fort Smith, Arkansas. There was a 10K core constructed event and a 3K Infinity event. Both were really fun. I had a great time playing the new meta and playing stuff that I got to experiment for because I was playing just so much Amber Steel on repeat. I wanted to get out of the deck for so long, even though it was fun, just because I had so many games on it. But yeah, I got to play it this weekend. I played Blue Steel both days. I think it's a fun spot when Blue Steel can be viable for both formats for me. So it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Cool. And Thiago, Zach, did you guys mess around with set 10 a little bit at a specific event? Or, I mean, we don't have to ask Thiago, everybody. We know what this man does 24/7 every day. But I'm curious, Zach, you mentioned previously you are very focused on current sets, like one at a time, right? So have you taken some time to dive a little bit deeper into set 10 yet?
Yeah, life's been insane for me this year, so I basically didn't play any set 9 at all. I just kind of showed up at the DLCs and hoped for the best. But yeah, I've been able to play some more set 10, so I'm excited about it. Very excited to move away from set 9, so yeah, I think it's been good so far.
Sure. And Thiago, I'm sure everybody wants to hear your opinion on what the best deck in the format is so far, but I've been speaking to you throughout the week, and you've kind of been telling me, and I think I agree. Like, it's very hard to tell week one, right? I think there's still a lot to discover. So I would love to hear your, a brief summary of how you felt within week one so far.
Yeah, so I've been playing a ton. I got the #1 ranked account on the online client, and then I made a second account and then passed myself with that account, so I had the top 2 ranked accounts. So I've just been playing a ton. I think the format's pretty wide open now. I think there's a ton of good decks right now, and I think there's not really anything that is super dominating. I think a lot of different directions you can take the meta, and I think a lot of the decks that people aren't considering to be the top decks right now have a lot of legs, and I think that we're going to see huge shifts between now and when most people are going to play a major tournament, which would be DLC Richmond in January.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the meta shaping up to be really, really interesting.
For sure, yeah. And in the interim, we actually have a lot of really cool events coming up. Granted, smaller events, but I know there's going to be a CCQ taking place in Spain and in Prague this weekend. In 2 weeks, I know, Thiago, you should be attending the DLC in Singapore, which would be very interesting. Would love to, I can't wait to hear your opinion on that, as it's going to be a best of 1 format. I'm going to be attending a CCQ that same weekend. Am I assuming all of you guys are going to try go to the CCQ in CCS, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I will be there.
Cool.
I will be there as well.
And Zach? Yeah.
We'll see.
Sure.
But good chance.
Cool. Awesome.
Come on, Zach. Get down there, man. What are you doing?
I arrived. My trip to Singapore to play a 1-day best of 1 tournament is a 9-day total trip. It's 35 hours on the plane plus a 13-hour time zone change. And so I leave Tuesday and arrive back the next Thursday. And then after this 9-day trip, then I go the next day to Atlanta to play CCS. So it's
fine. You'll bring a golden Mickey to Atlanta, won't you? It's easy.
I hope so. I gotta defend the title at CCS, man.
Yeah.
So you're saying you're also playing at PPG Florida then?
Absolutely not. I'm gonna be laying in bed,
on.
sleeping like a baby.
Dude,
it's gonna be.
You gotta go
I'm
on
gonna
straight.
start my Christmas break early. It'll be so nice.
Speaking of the PPG event, let's get into the deck list. But before we do, of course, I want to shout out PPG for their Pro Play Summit happening on the 12th to the 14th. They have their 5K happening on Friday, their 10K happening on Saturday, and an Infinity 5K event on the Sunday, which I think Sky is going to really enjoy. I have to say, out of all of us, it seems like Sky is the player that is really enjoying Infinity the most. From what I've seen, gets to play with his beloved blue steel. So moving into some. Actually, before we move into some deck lists, I do have a generic metagame breakdown. This does look very, I will say, amateurish. I made this within like 2 minutes by using color emojis. But Thiago, I'd love for you to be able to just potentially break this down and just like explain where this data is taken from, if that's okay.
Yeah, so this is just a little breakdown of what people were playing in the first week across the Set 10 tournaments. This is not all of the decks that were played. This is just like what has been reported to Inkdex. I think this is across 7 tournaments of Set 10, and so it's not like weighted to like count the most important tournaments the most or anything. It's just a very generic overview for people who have not been looking at Set 10 a ton and just kind of want an idea of what's going on. So, and I think it's like somewhat representative of what the meta really does look like. So if we take a look at this top row, these are the decks that are between 20 and 25% of the meta. So we have purple steel, green blue, and blue steel. So these decks I think are widely considered to be the 3 top decks of the meta. I think they all have somewhat good matchups against all the decks under them, but I think that the decks under them can certainly be built in ways to compete with them. What is very interesting about this is that there is kind of a lack of a sort of middle class where like a lot of these metagames tend to have decks in this like 10 to 13 to 15% range. And this one, there's a stark drop off between the 3rd best deck in the game and the 4th best deck in the game. So like blue steel is like about 20%, and then the next most played deck is Blurple at 9%. So we're kind of missing this like middle area that we're so accustomed to seeing many decks in. But then if we do take a look at this next row, we see Blurple, Amber Steel, and Green Yellow. Green Yellow is being made up of this Circle of Life deck that is trying to utilize the Circle of Life to bring back Prince Philip to combo with the Malicious, Mean, and Scary to take out the entire board of the opponent. But we're also seeing the just typical dogs deck that we have seen in the last format do super well. There's been one very big tournament in Set 10, which is the most important tournament. It was a CCQ in the Netherlands that was about 225 players. Frank Karsten was there. World champion DKP was there. So this is really where we have the best information. And there was 2 dogs decks, just classic dogs like we're used to seeing, that made top 8, despite it being very, very low representation. So I think dogs just separated away from the green yellow Circle of Life decks is about 2 or 3% of the meta. So it was doing extraordinarily well. And then Blurple and Amber Steel are still sticking around. I think they're still fine decks, but I think there's a lot more other powerful things you can do. So that's why we've seen such a big drop off in those. And then the next tier is red, purple, and green, purple. I think these decks are both pretty good. And I think that they're also going to have more iterations coming as the metagame develops, and I think that those decks will be risers. I think those decks are super, super playable. And then under that is just all of these decks that are 1 to 2 to 0% of the meta. So these are decks we're not seeing a ton. I'm a bit surprised to see green steel over here. Again, this data is not like the 100% end all be all of anything, so I'm sure we'll see green steel finding its footing later in the meta.
Sure. No, that's really, really useful. Thank you for that detailed breakdown. And I have to agree, I think there's definitely going to be a couple of these decks that will be rising over the next few weeks. It's super early. Even the amount of players from the CCQ in Utrecht really isn't that many. I think it was like 200 and something. Compared to like the event that we cast this weekend was 900 plus players for the CCQ in Paris, which was still set 9. If anything, I always think about this as like for like a content versus player perspective, and I think I've spoken about this already. Like, if anything, I think it proves that for the release weekend, it's probably extremely difficult for players to get their hands on the new cards when the set comes out on Friday and you've got a major tournament on Saturday. When you look at the numbers of like a CCQ, that's 900 players, that's set 9, that is a metagame that everybody can play because they have the cards versus a metagame that people can't play because they don't have the cards. I do think from a viewership perspective, from what I saw on the weekend, like JDZ's stream absolutely popped off for the Sharp Gaming event because people want to see set 10 stuff, right? It's opening weekend, they want to see new decks. But you really do have to consider the players, right? Like, Sky, as we move in to talk about your decks and stuff, which is on the next slide here, I'm curious about your experience of just like obtaining the cards you needed. Like, was it a situation of like, oh, I went to the event and they specifically said they had enough cards on sale for everybody, or was it still like a tough issue for you to get them?
They had a bunch of product, sealed product that was at like pretty good price. I think there's some boxes for like 109 or something.
Yeah.
It's really good. And like I'm not somebody who opens packs like hardly ever for this set. I think I haven't opened like an actual box since set 3. But I was like, all right, that's a good price. It's actually a good set. It seems like there's like almost half the enchanteds are like pretty good hits. So and then like the legendaries all have like really good value this set. So I bought a case. I was super fortunate. I opened I think 3 regular Cindy's and a foil Cindy.
Whew!
So like
Very lucky.
I had like Cindy's and Goliath set aside because I knew I was gonna play Blue Steel for the main event. Because he had singles as well, and then I just opened like pretty much everything I needed. No enchanted, so like it wasn't that crazy a value because.
Oh sure, just all
like
the
8
best
boxes.
legendaries I need for my deck. No enchanted.
Yeah, I mean I opened like 8 boxes, no enchanted. So my enchant luck is terrible, but I'm like opening like a practical player for some reason. So I had like a bunch of Cindy's and a bunch of Goliaths, and I just was able to get everything. Obviously, not everybody can just buy a case, but they did have like enough singles of like the hard to get stuff like Cindy's and Goliaths on sale. Like if people showed up and needed to buy them. So yeah, that wasn't too bad. I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was because I was kind of afraid like we got there super late on Friday night, and like so I'd have to like show up the morning of with and find all the cards that I needed. But thankfully, we were able to get the box and have good luck with it.
Yeah, and it actually just shows the example of like, yeah, you were very lucky in your situation that you had a lot of the cards, and you can imagine for most players if they do want to build like a 4 copy count of Cinderella in their like main deck, they just can't, or it's like extremely difficult. So, like I said, I think content wise, we all want to see new decks, and I think it still worked out pretty well that this weekend there were a few of these events that were, you know, between let's say 50 players to 100, 200 players. But you can never. I just think it's very unrealistic to expect a massive event for a weekend where the set's just launched because players just can't get cards. But anyways, let's break down this blue steel deck that we have in front of us from you, Sky. I believe this is the I mean I think I have your Infinity deck first. Maybe I might have actually removed your main deck, which I can pull up after. But I was like, yeah, since when is Lucky Diamond core constructed? I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is your this is your Infinity deck. So talk to us about that before we get into set 10.
Yeah, so I played Blue Steel in both events, but for me, Infinity was like a lot more fun. I didn't practice at all for Infinity. I kind of just planned on going in and taking like my Chicha list that Luke had won the Ink event with. But then I was like thinking about the night before, and I was like, wait a minute, Cindy just does what Chicha does, but it's on a body that's you just have to play one card, you don't have to play Quill with it, and she can also sing the next turn, and she also like threatens to do it every turn just like Chicha. So it's like I think Cindy's actually just the way to go. And you already play like 4 of Bell, which can trigger her each turn after. And like throwing in 4 of Mulan is like a very solid 1-drop in Infinity that just kind of digs you a little bit further in your deck and is like a solid 1-cost answer if you're playing against aggro or something. So I just like threw together a list, like changed a bunch of stuff, put in like Might Solve a Mystery, which I think is a super solid card as well. In a deck that has this many items, like you're always gonna hit like 2 cards pretty much. So like it's crazy that like Cindy has the option of singing removal, but against like the grindier matchups, she can also just sing Might Solve a Mystery and draw 2 more cards. So like essentially, if you trigger her and sing Might Solve a Mystery, she in a way she like drew 4 cards, which is just absolutely absurd. But yeah, this deck is very crazy. Going into the event, I knew the only bad matchup would be like Amber Steel aggro. I didn't expect too much of it, so I think every match I just felt really bad for my opponent, who like I could tell didn't put that much time into Infinity, and it just kind of felt like they were just kind of showing up with the deck. And I was just like playing like 7 cards per turn, like mid to late game, and just like going crazy on them. I went undefeated in Swiss, and I was like 4-0 ID'd in to top cut. I was first seed. My top 8 match I played against Red Blue Shark, which felt like super outdated and I mean, he had Cindy and stuff, so it's like you can kind of do some stuff with that. But this deck just uses Cindy so much better. Like I remember, I think the game 1 I played Cindy. Second turn I played another Cindy, and then the turn after, each turn after I was just dropping a Bell or Mulan and double triggering Cindy, and I had like 14 ink at the end of the game, which was only like 8 turns long. But it just felt super crazy and unfair what you're able to do with Cinderella. So that's why I named it Cindy Will Get Banned, because it just, I don't know, something seems wrong about this. And like even if aggro is like the answer to this and everybody brings aggro, you can just put in like heavy spooky sight and like you at least force them to play Pete, and like this deck with Bell on turn 1 is like probably strong enough to be fine getting around that for a turn if they're taking a turn to Pete. So like I don't know. I feel like something has got to be changed here. Like the meta will, to me for sure, like looking like it's going to be like blue steel or like aggro or maybe some green steel as well. I think that deck is fine also, but I think there's enough answers in this list to be definitely a force to be reckoned with.
I find it very interesting, or funny rather, that you're like, you call this Cindy will be banned, and then Cindy gets banned, and you can still play Cindy in this list because it's an Infinity format, and it doesn't matter if the card's banned, right?
Yeah, well, I think if they ban it, they're gonna have to ban it both. So I think it's maybe a little bit more of a problem right now in this format. Like it's actually just crazy what it opens up.
Sure.
The main thing is like it has to be answered. So like you get value immediately. Like you essentially get 2 cards immediately. One gets ink, which is higher tempo. And if they don't answer, which they don't want to answer because you already got value and it's a 2/3 that quests for 1, you can sing and re-trigger it, which is like, oh my gosh, the game kind of just over if that happens. Like especially if you're going first, my gosh, like there's decks can't really answer this efficiently when they're going second. Like if the best way to answer is if you like went first and have your own Cindy that can sing like a removal on their Cinderella.
I think it makes sense, yeah, in this type of build where also the princesses you're playing to trigger this are often free or cost 1, right? Like you're not paying a massive cost.
Yeah, with how many cards this deck draws, you can just easily drop 1 every turn after.
Yeah.
It's no tax at all. It's actually a good thing, like dropping a free bell usually.
Well, yeah, if you guys are interested in playing Infinity, this is definitely one of the best decks you can look at playing initially. But luckily, we do have your core constructed deck list here. Good old blue steel. This looks very similar to one of the decks we showed off previously, I believe, where you've got like the 2/1 jumps. You're still playing the Headless Horseman. Curious to hear how that Headless Horseman felt in the end, because I know that was a card that people are kind of going a little bit back and forth on within blue steel. You want to play enough actions with it. How much damage is it actually dealing on average? So yeah, would love to hear your experience on that card specifically.
Yeah, so initially when I heard people were playing this card, I was like, it's probably not right. It's probably just like a fun card that's like not necessary to add RNG into the equation, because you have 4 Hades, 4 Vincenzo, 4 Tinkerbell. It felt like you had enough big stuff, but like I tried it and like the more I played with it, I was like, okay, it's just like it's good to have this like 12 giant things to drop in this style of deck where you have to hit it. Like you cannot waste 1 turn of not hitting this stuff, and it's like it's very rewarding to be able to like play with no cards and just have like over half your deck be outs to like a big thing between like vision, develop, and the 12 big things. So the card is just great. Like even if it just hits for 4, like that's good. Like you can remove a genie, can remove like any mid-sized thing. Sometimes it can hit for 6 and take out stuff like a Hades, and it can be like a full-on answer to that. But the card was great. Like it's also just a tank, so like if they don't Hades it, it's gonna like be favorable trades if the game is kind of like a back and forth mirror match thing where you're still fighting for board control.
Thiago, I'd love to pass this to you. You've played, I imagine, numerous games either with this deck or against this deck, or at least a similar version online. Where have you found that this potentially struggles in the metagame? I mean, because we're talking about blue steel as like one of the top 3 decks at the moment right now. So does it have a particular weakness you think an opponent could kind of exploit?
Yeah, I mean, I've played a ton of games myself. I've played a ton of games against Sky, like before this tournament happened. I think in 3 days we probably played like 100 games or something. Like we were playing a good chunk. So I think the biggest weakness of this deck is definitely the aggressive decks, especially with the way they're building now. Like maybe they need to play a bajillion spooky sites and a bunch of Captain Hooks, but with the way these decks are currently built, they have a big weakness against the super aggressive decks. Just because these decks don't play for board early. These decks, if you have a 1-drop, it's not a super strong one. On turn 2, you're ramping. On turn 3, you're ramping again. And so if you don't hit Cindy as your turn 3 ramp and you're not representing the ability to sing Strength of Raging Fire or he Herald's Thunderbolt the following turn, then you really are falling very, very far behind against these proactive lines that the aggressive decks can take. But if they are just slightly slow, like a purple steel deck, then you are able to easily bridge yourself into the point where you're playing these giant characters. You have like 12 mid-sized characters between Namari, Goliath, and Tinkerbell, and 12 giant guys between Hades, Vincenzo, and Horseman. And as Sky said, you also have these like consistency cards like Develop and Visions. So if you're against anything that's like even slightly mid-rangey, you completely dunk on them just because what you're doing is so much more powerful on average. But the super aggressive strategies can be difficult for you. Some different builds of green-blue can be difficult against you. I think cutting cards like Beyond the Horizon is becoming more standard, and that was like also a card that helped you against green-blue. So depending on how the decks are built, you don't dominate green-blue or anything like that. But really, if you're expecting a ton of blue steel, the best way to go is super aggressive.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense that this would be kind of a mid-rangey killer, right? You're just doing super, super powerful stuff pretty consistently. Moving on to the next deck. This is the winning deck from the CCQ in Utrecht. I want to give a huge shout out to Promised Land. The winner of this event, he's also one of my teammates from the Playing Ducks, took down this entire event. Was pretty high on green-blue last set with one of my other fellow teammates, and just super happy to see him take down the whole event. So, Zach, I would love to pass this over to you since this is a deck that you brought to DLC Milwaukee, similar to me, and would love to hear your overall opinion on the idea of some of these inclusions, right? Like we have the 3 spooky site, which is clearly there for kind of aggro. It's interesting split between a lot of these cards, like 2 John Silver, 2 Max Goof, 2 Hades, so like not 4 Hades like we've seen where you're really relying on like, 4 Hades traditionally was kind of better against stuff like Blurple, or the slower matchups was probably better against something like Blue Steel, whereas, John Silver is there for aggro, Max Goof is there to recycle songs. Yeah, curious to hear any thoughts you have on this particular build.
Yeah, so green blue is very, very good right now. And yeah, I brought it to Milwaukee. So current green blue kind of plays similar to how I built for Milwaukee, to where I wasn't relying on the shift targets. I was playing with the Pleakleys and just like going straight to like 6 or 7 8. So Cinderella kind of plays into that, and Cinderella is just an incredible card, and it lets you play stuff like the Spooky Sight, whereas Spooky Sight is not very good otherwise. At least you have an out to get it out of your hand with something like Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
I think the list is interesting. I don't really agree with a lot of the stuff. Like, I hate Mother's Knows Best. I've always hated that card. And I definitely want 4 Hades. Like, the meta is like so Sapphire dominated, and that card is just so important in the mirror match. So I would definitely want that, and not so sure on the triple Spooky Sight, because basically this list is not very good into other Sapphire decks, I don't think. So I think I would look to adjust towards that. But I think the deck gained a lot this set, and definitely look forward to continue working with it.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about 4-drop options. I know, like, Thiago, you showed off your very thematic and cool, detective deck. And, I mean, I saw Ely, the Bologna DLC champion from last year. He was playing this Paris CCQ this weekend. And I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter, but he brought Ruby Emerald, and he finished top 16 at a 900-player CCQ event, which is just absolutely bonkers. But I mean, granted, that whole deck is incredibly hard to pilot, and you really have to rely on your like Clarabelle shift targets for like all of your card draw. It does power line shifts, which is cool. But the one standout card throughout that entire deck that I just kept seeing was this 4-cost Donald Duck. I just think this 4-cost Donald Duck is such an incredible 4-cost card because of the 5 willpower. Honestly, like I guess maybe especially in the previous meta, I saw, you see a lot of like Purple Steel is kind of like a lot of 3-strength characters, and then even Blurple is like 2, 3, 4 strength. It's really difficult unless you're doing some support stuff to just challenge this with one character very cleanly. I feel like your opponent always has to commit like at least 2 of their characters, or a character and a card from hand. So to be able to answer the Donald consistently, I think requires usually like 2 pieces of the puzzle from your opponent, and then just like what it does is just like keep your card draw engine going, keep you trying to find your combo pieces, which in a deck like this is heavily reliant on you finding stuff like your Malicious, Mean, and Scary, and the Prince Philip. I think like it's easy to say, but it truly is like a standout card in these green blue decks. And if I'm starting to see other people like maybe play like Kitas or any other 4-drop, I think for me at least, I'm so convinced that Donald is the 4-drop, and I just don't think it's anything else. It's probably just Donald and Cindy every time on the 4-cost slot. And
How do you like seeing that this deck is now cutting your favorite card Under the Sea? The entire reason why you started playing green blue in the first place, and now they're replacing it with Spooky Sight.
sure, that everybody says it is still my most signed card. I think just because all of the crossover it had with the green yellow deck. I don't mind too much. Like, people think I love Under the Sea so much. Like, I don't know. I liked Kita Under the Sea because that was a very cool combo. But like just playing Under the Sea by itself was like it's fine. And Malicious, Mean, and Scary is just a I'm not gonna say more consistent combo piece, but as we've been talking about the whole time, it just feels way more like Sisu, where you're also leaving behind this gigantic threat that is usually very difficult for your opponent to answer. But it's also interesting within this metagame because, as you mentioned, Zach, it can be quite Sapphire heavy. So if you still do the combo, they can just answer it with like a Hades or some other type. If you're playing a mirror match, like they can just at least get rid of it with like You're Welcome or something like that. I do like at least that the green blue player has included a 1 copy of Bend to My Will. I think that's important, especially if you're going to see a lot of mirrors here happening again soon. But overall, I think the general build is okay. I do kind of agree with you, Zach. I think you can very easily take out like the Mother Knows Best and even the Max Goof, because the Max Goof I feel like is there to combo with the Malicious, Mean, and Scary and get it recurring back. But you can easily add a couple more Hades in. I think 2 John Silver is fine. You can maybe cut down on Spookies a little bit. Maybe add something for more of the mid-rangey / Sapphire decks. And then I think, honestly, you've got yourself a super solid just like set 10 green-blue deck. Like, I think this isn't too far from a very core deck, I would say. It's just got a little bit of different things going on with like the Mother Knows Bests and the Max Goof. But I'm interested to just see how the deck will slightly evolve or slightly adapt. Again, I can't see it changing drastically, but it might just adapt to, is it more of an aggressive meta? Is it more mid-range? Is it more like lots of control mirror matches? But I think the deck is ultimately very, very similar to what it was before. And I don't even think it's that much of a bad thing, because I think there's plenty of room for other decks to exist while green-blue exists as well. We even saw, like, what was interesting to me about this event is I think from all of Fabled, we saw green-blue perform pretty consistently, but it never took down an event. I can't recall green-blue ever winning a major big event, right? It was always Amber Steels, Blurples, and Amethyst Steels, and green-blue was kind of like that 4th deck the whole time. So now we've seen it take down an event. I don't know how long this will last. If we get to see a couple more green-blues take down events, I think we can really say, yeah, the deck has drastically improved with the likes of the Malicious, Mean, and Scary and Prince Philip combo. So that's the stuff I always want to pay attention to, is like a deck can be good, but does it have what it takes to consistently take down multiple events, right?
And I know that the like most atypical thing that this deck is playing from what we would usually see in green blue is this Max Goof Mother Knows Best combo. So a lot of people are going to be like quick to cut it, but I know like in his top 4 match against Frank Karsten, Frank was saying how the Max Goof was able to replay Malicious, Mean, and Scary and just demolish his board. So it's not something I've seen a ton of people experimenting with, but he might have been like literally the only person in this entire tournament to play it, and then he ends up winning the tournament. So I think it is definitely, it has enough merit that it should be something that people try out instead of just like instantly cutting from their deck without like even playing with it yet.
Sure, that definitely makes sense. I'm going to pass this one over to you, Thiago. We have a Blurple deck list from Zero, which is I think people have been looking at this and they're saying, what in the Frank Karsten is this? Because there's a lot of 1 and 2 ofs and like, but I think, honestly, I think at the start of a set, it's a cool way to build. I know, as we've seen, it's a specific way that Frank builds, wants to try out a lot of different tools, a lot of different like new cards. And there's some that catch my eye, for example, like this 5-cost Whisper Ursula, right? So I'd like to maybe take it from there potentially, Thiago. I'd love to hear your opinion on the idea of this card in Blurple.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting card. I think it can cost 6, which is something that your deck, a part of your mana curve, that you don't have a ton of great options, especially since TikTok's like what they were playing before, but that card was so like specific to what that meta was and like how people could answer it and just the way that it like dominated decks like Purple Steel and things like that. So, and it was important to like have that extra 1 cost in your mana cost so that it like threatens that your 4 cost can sink second star to the right. Um, I don't know. A lot of crazy decks come up in the first week because, you know, there's like card availability issues or
Yep.
like you're playing against people with card availability issues. I'm very interested to see if like I could talk to this guy. I would have my first question would be like this Dolores Madrigal Dumbo split. I have not seen that before. I'm going to
Sure.
assume that he submitted what he thought were the 60 best cards, and it was like not that he didn't own Dumbos or something. So because he was one spot away from making it to Continentals.
Yep.
So if that's the case, I think Dumbo is just a um, more flexible card and a more high impact card. So I would personally rather just see Dumbos there. Um, this split of like one drops doesn't make that much sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you want to split, like when we see Frank Carson splitting like the cards within the same mana cost, it's usually cards that have very different effects so that when you're presented with a situation where you have more than one in your hand, you can choose to ink one and play the one that's best in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas by splitting Royal Guard and Rafiki, you kind of are making the like decision before you have any information in the game, and then also like you don't get that much by picking the one that's better for the situation because they're just so incredibly similar. I do think the Royal Guard is like super underrated right now. I think everybody's just like copying over their decks that they played last time. They're like, oh, last meta we determined that Rafiki's better, which means Rafiki's better. And that's not the case anymore, especially when you're adding cards like this Junior Woodchuck's Guidebook. Like I think the part of the problem with Royal Guard in the last set was that you only had these effects that drew a single card usually. So you'd have like Genie and Sail and Hypnotic Strength. And then if you had one of these, then it was the same as Rafiki, and if you didn't have one of them, then it was worse than Rafiki, and then
Mm-hmm.
you were only more than Rafiki if you were like singing second star to the right. And so now that we're introducing some of these more like mid-rangey card draw things like Hades and Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, I think the Royal Guard becomes much better. But yeah, other than that, this is a very
Unique list.
highly
Yep.
Blurple deck. So I think
Would
I
you
mean,
recommend people to
credit
look
to
at
this player.
like for example, like I know JDR has like a generic kind of blurple, which is stuff that I would consider maybe a little bit more standard. I'm curious to hear your opinion. I've seen him say this multiple times on Twitter, where he's like, blurple is now a tier 1.5 deck, where it's still good, but it's like I don't want to say it's gotten weaker, but there have been other decks that have also just gotten very strong. Would you agree with that like rating of, I guess, like a tier 1.5 deck?
Yeah, maybe that or slightly lower. I think the problem with Blurple is like your color is not more consistent than the other top color combinations. You're not like more powerful than them anymore. And I just don't really know what reason you would have to play Blurple in the meta. I a lot of these decks are like now just playing only Hades and Junior Woodchuck Guidebook as their card draw. And like if you're paying 3 ink and a card to draw 2 cards, it's like so poor. Like the reason why Friends on the Other Side is good is not because you could pay 3 ink to draw 2 cards. It was like you would pay 0 to do it, and then sometimes you would pay 3 when it was okay.
Hmm.
It's not like having that be like a hard cast. Like if pull the lever was just you draw 2 cards and you didn't have the option to like discard it with a Diablo or something, and then you didn't get the payoff from the wrong lever benefiting off of it, and that being a hyper efficient card, right? A 3 mana inkable banish a character is like you get a lot of payoff for having taken a bad inefficient turn with your pull the lever to draw 2 cards, and pull the lever can make them discard a card when they have 0 cards, and when they have 1 card in hand to put them to 0 cards, which can win you the game sometimes. So like just playing that in your deck, like for no other benefit, like they're cutting the Tamatoas and stuff. Like I think one of the biggest benefits to Blurple is that you're the only combination that can play Tamatoa, which is a super powerful card, with a item that's good with it, which is the guidebook. Whereas no other color combination can play Tamatoa in that. And so like you can argue that this is too slow and it doesn't fit in the meta, and I would probably agree with you, but then I just don't understand why you would choose to play these 2 colors over playing a different deck
Sure,
personally.
sure. All right, let's move on to purple steel. Again, a deck that you have a lot of experience in, but I'll pass this over to Sky briefly. Did you face any purple steel within your tournament, Sky?
Not in core, but in Infinity I did, and it felt very unfair because I was playing blue steel, and he was just like bouncing stuff with Metagame Snake and replaying it. I was like, okay, that's fine.
Sure.
But I think I played against purple steel a lot in practice for the core event.
Yep.
It felt very good. I think I liked it better than it was last set. I think the Hades card was like really good. I mean, I'm coming from the perspective of pretty much only testing blue steel, so but even then, Hades, it felt very good. Like, if thinking back at what it does, like even if it's always just draw 2, it's a big body that draws 2, and it can like threaten to sing anything for the next turn. So like it just filled that, the turns where Hades came out in like turn 4 or 5, it filled that role like very well, and it seemed like super solid. Not when I was playing Goliath and I was going first, obviously, then those cards are probably getting discarded, but the card felt really good actually for sleeping on it a little bit at the start of the set. This list, I don't really know how I feel about stuff like the 3-cost Tinkerbell. I think, like, especially without running the shift, I don't really see what you're like going for there. I guess you're trying to go under some things, like maybe green blue or maybe even blue steel, but I think this deck doesn't really have the capability too much to go under. Like, yes, you have a little bit of burn with like Cobra and stuff, but that's not a whole lot. I think you're probably better off just curving out with a standard purple steel game plan. It's always interesting to see counts of like Zeus in this deck, because obviously you main singers are all 3-cost, and like obviously turn 5 you can sing if you played something like a Genie or a Dumbo even, but at that point, like, I don't know, it's like most of the game is probably decided, because it's like maybe you hit your strength the turn before.
Yep.
Do you really need that at that point? So stuff like that's always interesting. And you do have stuff to buff it with, like with the 5-cost Haze, which is kind of interesting. But other than that, it looks pretty standard. I think 1 Demona seems about right. I think that was what Thiago was testing when we were playing. The card seemed pretty strong. It's funny that Demona kind of turns off Goliath from untapping, which is like a fun little flavor thing. But I don't know. The deck feels good. I'd say it's like definitely tier 1. But I think it does have an unfavorable matchup into blue steel, and I think blue steel is actually probably going to be the front runner for this format. I think blue steel beats green blue, which is an important thing that will kind of keep it at the top, I guess. And if that's the case, then this deck might not be the best play. I'm not sure how this match deck goes into green blue. I'd assume maybe it's a little bit favored, but it's probably not that crazy.
I imagine it's not that crazy. Like, I did a very, very brief, we played a couple of games on stream basically of like our set 10, a very similar set 10 Amethyst Steel build looking like this against the green blue deck, and Amethyst Steel did win. But one of the things you notice quickly is something like a Hades is not the best against green blue when you're playing Clarabelles, so you're just drawing more cards, which is just fueling them with more cards. That was like one thing you notice very, very quickly. I would say I do like the idea of at least this 3-1 split between Lexington and the Genie. I think Lexington is a very, very, very strong card, but I think it is notable that, you know, it's alert and not evasive on your turns. Like, having a 1 Genie can be okay if you want to combo with the Dumbo. That being said, if you're expecting a lot of Amethyst Steel, it's not that great, because then their Lexingtons are just going to trade into your Genies. Yeah, the 4 Tinkerbell, I'm also not too sure on. It definitely seems like it's trying to go under some decks. From what we saw, like it's very much in there against like the Blurples, right? From set 9, it's like Amethyst Steel versus Blurple. Tinkerbell is really going to help you get through that matchup, again, a lot of lore very, very fast. But Tinkerbell, like, if you're playing a bunch of Amethyst Steel mirrors, this Tinkerbell is terrible. It's absolutely terrible, in my opinion. So I'm also a little bit confused why it's there, but maybe they felt like they could like use the kind of more aggressive body and potentially didn't expect to play a lot of mirror matches. But most of it still seems, like I said, fairly standard with a few different things. Like 3 Timothy Q Mouse is also interesting. Again, it's just that general curve of like just maybe trying to be a little bit more aggressive. I can see you smirking, Thiago. Go on, rip this deck apart.
It's just because I know that Zach is dying to talk about this 4 of Tinkerbell and Timothy Q Mouse, so I'll let him go first.
Go ahead, Zach. Go ahead.
I'll leave the Tinkerbell alone a little bit. I mean, he is Frank Karsten. He did just win the DLC, so I mean, he's totally valid in playing the Tinkerbells. It's just like in the context of the format of last set and even now, like it just gets shredded by genies and
Yeah.
Lexingtons and Elsas and genies and everything else in the world. So I can see where it could help you win more games when you're going first and they miss an answer or something, but like you're already in a good spot there. So like I don't know. Just definitely not a huge fan of Tinkerbell. But it makes a little more sense with Timothy because you need the evasive. So I mean Timothy Q Mouse is fine. It's not the worst card ever. One card that I do love that we gained is this new Cheshire Cat. For a lot of reasons. Like Purple Steel just wants to have a ton of 3-drops in their deck so that you can just mulligan aggressively, never have to keep a 3-drop in your opening hand. So just having a 3/4 3-drop is already good right there. But this deck did also want to have that Bell effect last set, but you didn't really love the Bell card, like being a 5/5 cost and having to hold it in your hand, whereas Purple Steel wants to empty their hand a lot. So being able to float the Bell effect at any point, you don't have to pay all 5 ink at once, and you can just have the cat on the board. So I think that's an amazing addition to this deck. So really love the Cheshire Cat. Not a huge fan of the Tinkerbell, but I mean it's Frank Karsten. I'm not going to say that he's wrong.
Sure.
Yeah. So basically, what I'll say about this deck is, the purple steel decks are not doing super well into the blue decks, and so the way that Frank went about trying to combat that is by playing this Timothy Q Mouse and Tinkerbell package to go much faster. It was something like this tournament was on the first day of the set, so it was like something that we had before the set came out. And basically, the context of the meta is so much different than it was last set, where last set, all of the decks, even the slow decks, played for board heavily early. So decks like Blue, Green, and Blurple were playing for board early, along with, of course, the other popular decks in the meta, Purple Steel, Amber Steel, and Green Yellow were all playing for board early. So a card like this Timothy Q Mouse was contested a lot. Even against Blurple, where he was like supposed to be good against, it was like you would just go second, and then you'd go like Palace Guard, Timothy Q Mouse, 3-drop, and they would play Elephant on their turn 3, and then you'd play 3-drop, and then they would Elsa tap down your 3-drop, challenge your 3-drop with their Elephant, and then you have a Timothy Q Mouse and a Palace Guard, and you can't finish their Elephant, so their Elephant's going to start moving damage. So it's really only good against Blurple going first. But now that's very different. Like these slow decks are not playing for board early, y'all. Like the green blue decks are not playing their Baymax shifts, which contested Timothy very, very early. They're not playing Under the Sea, and even if they are playing Under the Sea, then they don't have these early shift lines to support singing together Under the Sea early. So a card like Timothy Q Mouse goes uncontested very, very long into the game. And a card like Tinkerbell is excellent against Blue Steel. One of the things that Blue Steel used to struggle into in the past was Genie, but now that they have Cinderella and He Hurled His Thunderbolt, they don't struggle that much into it, and then they're able to use that on turn 4 or 5 to get them into the point of the game where they're casting their Vincenzos and Hades and Headless Horsemans to contest your Genies. But when you're curving Tinkerbell into Genie, then you're setting up this like critical mass of these evasive 2-questers, where now, especially when this is following a Timothy Q Mouse, then their answers are super thin, and if they ever miss Cinderella into He Hurls His Thunderbolt, they instantly lose the game. And basically, like, these blue steel decks are trying to go turn 1, pretty much nothing, turn 2 ramp, turn 3 ramp again. So they're passing the first 3 turns without developing anything on board. So if you're able to go Timothy into Tinkerbell, like, you're able to get these giant amounts of lore before they develop into the part of the game where they're the strongest at. This list in particular, there's a few things you can change, like the counts of the Timothy, Q Mouse, and Tinkerbell could be slightly lower. I think that it's important to have the option to not play them because they are so bad in the other matchups. A card like Black Heron is not great into the slow matchups, but it's still okay. Whereas a card like Timothy Q Mouse is really, really dreadful against the aggressive decks. And so a lot of people like saw this deck list and they're rushing to like go for Timothy Q Mouse, for Tinkerbell. Some people are even playing like red purple and they're adding like more copies of Tinkerbell because you have the Peter Pan Surfer, which is like the exact same card. And that's not like they're missing the point of what these cards are doing in the deck. These cards are very narrow situational cards that are very high impact. So when you have these cards and you have, for example, a Black Heron and a Timothy Q Mouse in your hand, then you give yourself the option to ink one and play the other on turn 2, depending on what matchup it is, and they're going to be high impact. Like Black Heron is very good against the aggressive decks, and Timothy Q is very good against the slow decks. And so by having this split, you're able to do which one's better. But as soon as you start adding a bunch of Timothys at the cost of other 2-drops, and you start adding a bunch of Tinkerbells or Peter Pans or whatever in the cost of your other 3-drops, you're taking away this option that you had, which is what made these cards so strong. Because when you're always playing Timothy into Tinkerbell, like, then you're going to lose a lot of games. Because if you're just going second or you're playing against decks where these aren't good, you're going to fall behind on board very, very dramatically, very quickly. So I would just caution people with that, but I think that it's a strong thing to have some numbers of to give yourself that out. I know there's a bunch of things to change, like I personally don't like this Violet Saberwing or Happy. I think you just can't play these 1 health characters in a meta where all of the green decks are playing 4 copies of Malicious, Mean, and Scary, and then they're able to just play it dry early, get rid of some of your characters, and then it doesn't even matter that it costs them a resource because they're going to play Clarabelle anyways.
Not even Malicious, Mean, and Scary, but also the blue steel decks playing Tinkerbell as well, right? It's like,
yeah,
it's not just the
Tinkerbell's
green
also
decks.
really,
Yeah.
really devastating. Yeah, that's a good point. And then, like, I think 1 copy of Demona is the best number of Demonas to play in a traditional purple steel deck, but I think as soon as you start adding these cheap high questers, then the 4th copy of Doc becomes much more valuable. And I think one of the costs to playing Timothy and Tinkerbell is that you see Frank have more 2-drops and more 3-drops than he would typically play in his previous lists. So he's really trying to, he's like cutting like a 4-mana card draw spell like Yzma or something to put in a Tinkerbell or to put in another Timothy Q Mouse. He's not cutting 2-drops or 3-drops. So then you kind of lose some of your potency in the late game because this deck's trying to not get to that point. So then you're kind of worse in the purple mirrors and stuff like that. So I'd again just caution people, don't like be like, oh, I had these 2 costs, I'm gonna get rid of them to put in Timothy. I had these 3 costs, I'm gonna get rid of them to put in Tinkerbell. Like it's not the same slots. So yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at with the deck list. I think
Sure.
it's the best way to play purple steel. I think if you are playing purple steel, you need to have some sort of these threats. Otherwise, you're just going to struggle too much into the blue decks. Purple steel is not a deck I am personally super interested in playing right now. I don't think it's like that's spectacularly well positioned. I would probably try to play some of the other decks that are slightly below these top 3. I think there's a lot of room to grow there, but I will never not consider purple steel for a big tournament, you know?
Sure. Yeah, taking a look at another version of blue steel here. Sky, would love for you to weigh in. We have 2 copies of the Beyond the Horizon. We've got some Kitas in here. Everything else seems nearly identical to the other build. We don't have the 2 copies of One Jump Ahead. So I guess, like, what do you feel Kita? Because I have seen lists like this that just run Kitas instead, and I think it's even something we talked about last week where, you know, your build is Cindy is the forecast, and that's the forecast we need to see, whereas this is like, I guess, the next best forecast, so you can probably play maybe.
Yeah, this list I actually like it a lot, and it's like the closest list that I've seen to what I brought this weekend. The main changes are no Kita for me, 4 vision, and then the change to Beyond the Horizon to like 1 jump.
Yep.
Then they shuffled around the 1 cost too. But starting with the 1 cost, which I actually kind of like, I like what they did here, and I see the direction that they're going. So, like we said, things with 1 health get banished to Tinkerbell, and that's not great. So in that matchup, if you're going to play a 1 cost, it's kind of nice to have something else. Also, Captain Hook is just much better into your worst matchup, which is like Amber Steel aggro. Like I tested a lot of like Spooky Sight, and then my last 2 slots of the deck were either 2 Spooky Sight or 2 Captain Hook. I just had 4 Mulan. But Spooky Sight was like so clunky with Goliath that like kind of like Beyond the Horizon is, and why I don't play it is because with Goliath it's like such a clunky card that like can just cause you to draw only 1 or sometimes even draw none. So like having like 4 copies of that in your deck is like really not great. Captain Hook is like similarly impactful in the matchup, like where if you start with it and have a strong curve with like Captain Hook into like Tipo into Cindy into Tank plus Sing Zeus or something, like it's like almost as good as having a Spooky Sight on turn 4. Definitely going first, it's like good enough to beat those decks. So I like the 4 of Captain. I think that might be something that I'll definitely try out more of.
Mhm.
Kita was another card that I tried out a bunch. It obviously seems like it should be great. Like if you miss Cindy, you can play it. If you play her after Cindy when you're going first and like versus a slow matchup, it can be good as well because you get just a bunch of ramp because she's also a princess.
Mhm.
But the more I played, the more I was like, I always wanted Damari in situations where I thought I would maybe want Kita over her, and also like going second is just way too slow. Even like if you miss Cindy and you have the option to double ramp with just like another like sail or
Mhm.
TPO or one jump, typically that was better than actually just playing the Kita. I mean, sometimes if you have the immediate Zeus, it's a little bit better, but like just getting to 6 and going into 7 is much more important because Kita you have to activate, so you can't
Yep.
swing with her, so she's really slow. So it just ended up being a little bit too slow. And like there was way too few matchups where I felt right in playing her as like a card just because it was like never came up. Similarly was like Beyond the Horizon. There was just not that many situations where I actually got the benefit and it was impactful. If you have a 7 cost like threat that's stuck to where you can be comfortable with singing that turn, you're probably in a spot where if it was any other big threat, like you were gonna win the game anyways, because then you have 2 big things on board and like probably remove 2 things with them. So like it's kind of just a liability that also, like I said, clunked up with Goliath that wasn't great. I think I would actually probably play Doc in a slot if I were to play some extra card draw, but what I found out was just Goliath is just insane. Like the games where you go first and you just go Cindy into Goliath, almost every matchup, unless it's like very aggressive, like at Amber Steel pretty much exclusively, you just won the game with that. So
Mhm.
like those games are covered by that. And then the games you're going second, you have like an extra card. You're playing a little bit more defensively. If you typically you just want to go like Cindy into tank into 7 cost straight off the bat and just keep just playing them out. Like you don't really take a turn to like play Beyond the Horizon for card draw. You have that extra card, like just playing a 6 cost into your 7 cost, and eventually like finishing with like a headless horseman was typically enough to the games that you went second. So I don't know. This deck seems very good. I I like that they maxed out the 4 cost on the 4 counts on all the big threats. Like there was like an element to me that wanted to play a little bit less like of the big stuff, and I was playing stuff like One of Pleakley to make my odds of hitting a turn 3 character ramp but like decently better because it increases by like 7 or 8%. But like the more I diluted the deck, I was just like, this is just not as strong because like there's some games where you do like miss like a big thing, and like if you're playing only 10 of these 7 and 8 costs versus 12, it actually feels like a pretty big difference. So
Mhm.
I like keeping the 4 of Zvaldo. So this build seems very solid.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. You make a really good point about
Yeah.
sometimes just ramping. If you miss the Cindy, just like try to do double ramp instead, and it makes so much sense because you're hitting it instantly. And Kita is just like such a delayed card. Like I guess the Kita makes more sense in a build like this where you're also playing Beyonds if you really want to stick a singer, but like also it's like okay. Also, kind of what you mentioned with what I find interesting about Cinderella as a card is in the decks where it's only Cinderella, like she's the only princess. So that's like green blue is the typical one where she's the only princess in the deck, and you play her. Your opponent never really wants to remove it because it's kind of done its job, but then there's like the kind of risk if they play another Cinderella, then it's really bad. So that's also why I think Cinderella feels so strong. Is in some decks she just comes down and does her job. It's nearly like she has an on play effect. Um, and then your opponent doesn't want to waste like a key piece of removal for like this, just like 2-3 that might just sit around for the rest of the game doing nothing. But on the other hand, you could start getting crazy activations and crazy triggers, and that's a lot more likely, at least even in this blue steel build. That even if it doesn't have Kitas, you've got the Namaris and the Mulans. That's one other thing to consider. Like you mentioned, Sky. Yes, cutting the Namaris makes sense, or going down to 2 Mulans makes sense because of the Malicious Me and Scary and the Tinkerbells. But then you're also cutting some princesses. I guess that doesn't matter too much. But if you really care about triggering Cinderella a little bit more, then maybe the extra Mulans are still quite nice. But overall, no, I think you summarized the deck really well, and I think again between this deck and your deck, I think we're very much seeing a core build of what Blue Steel is this set that people can definitely build upon for sure.
Yeah, a couple more
The-
things just to finish off on
Yep.
was One Jump Ahead I do think has an important spot in this. I think if you look at the math of what it does for your ramping and your double ramping case scenarios, if you don't hit Cindy, it's pretty important. It's also just another card that you can sing with Cindy, like say a lot of times when you're going first, your goal is to play Goliath on turn 4 and then like have a song to sing, so you can ink, play a character, and have a song to sing, so you at least draw 1 card. Sometimes if you're greedy and you play the 1 cost and like a TPO and do that, you can still do that if you top deck the song, but like it has to be off the top deck, which can't always happen. So it's usually you draw 1 card with your first Goliath trigger. But having 1 jump be like an extra version of that, it's actually quite good because it kind of draws you a card in a way, and because you're gonna want to at least ink up to like 8 ink, is pretty nice. So having like 10 things that can do that is like is very nice. Another thing is also like I thought double Cindy at the start of this format would be a little bit more prevalent than it is. It is still very good if you're going first and if you have the time to go Cindy into Cindy, it's nice. But going second, you definitely don't have time to do that. You'd much rather play something like Namari. And sometimes even going first, something like Namari, having that filter is like a little bit better. The extra ink is nice, but Namari is just a much more threatening body. It's kind of starting like the Hades race, where like if you play double Cindy, like they don't want to Hades either things. They don't really care. Like, yeah, you have a bunch of ink, and if you trigger it the next turn, it can be like super good. But like, if you play Namari, they kind of have to answer Namari because she's always going to threaten to swing and take out anything and probably live. So like, they have to Hades that, and then if you start dropping your 7 costs and 8 costs, then they're going to have to. You'll be 1 step ahead on like the removal, which is typically better than like having a bunch of ink.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think the Namari's filtering effect is also just like so much more valuable in this deck than some of the decks that she's been played in before, because this deck is only trying to play 1 card a turn. So like if you just have an extra look at like one of your like 32, 36 good cards, then it like very consistently makes sure that you're spending all of your ink every single turn, even late into the game when you don't have any cards in hand. So I think she's like super strong with that. I think this list is literally just like 56 of the cards that we showed in the list on the podcast last week. I think it just added 4 hooks instead of 2 Mulans and 2 1-jumps, which, yeah, I mean, as Sky said before, like your worst matchup is Amber Steel, so having a little bit more reinforcement in that matchup is super strong. In terms of the Kita, instead of something like Visions, I think what the Kita gives you is an alternative to Cinderella, of course. But in my opinion, you almost always want to be ramping on the second turn to get to 6 ink or 7 ink on the 4th turn. And so by having Kita instead of one of those other ramp cards, even if it's just Sail or Tipo or 1 jump ahead, then your curve ends up looking like you skip from 2 ink to 4 ink to 5 ink to 7 ink with the Kita effect, instead of just doing your typical 2 to 4 to 6. And so your deck doesn't really have enough 5 costs to really curve well with the Kita. So I think usually it's best to just skip it and go straight to 6 with a worse ramp card. But what the Kita does provide you is like some extra consistency with having singers. The problem is that Kita is really bad at singing songs, because you like play Kita on turn 3 and then turn 4 sing a song, and then they attack it with their Captain Hook or Rafiki or Calhoun, and it's pretty devastating. So I think the right maybe 4 Cindy's is too few 4-cost singers, but I think maybe it would be a different random 4 cost that you would play in that other slot. Like I think the list that won the tournament Sky played might have played like a Mare Windhorse or something. Like I think something like that, where you just play like a 5th or 6th 4-drop. That's something that's like actually good at singing to help you in the aggressive matchups where you can't just ramp another time on turn 3. Might be suitable.
Are you still like? I mean, I'm curious, Sky, that you're talking about like the one-up Pleakley, and obviously you don't want to dilute your like Pleakley. Also, just seems like another fine alternative to this Kita. Granted, it's not a 4-cost singer that you probably want with um the Thunderbolt, but yeah,
that's the only downside of Pleakley, is he can't sing the 4-cost song. I mean, still being able to sing Strength is like still probably the best. If I were to take out like a Kita in this deck and I was like looking for an alternative, I would for sure play 1 Pleakley. I wouldn't play like another 4-cost. Like I'd for sure have to play more 5-cost, like maybe the Jasmine or whatever, the 3/7. Namari is great, like, but if you're going like Kita into Namari, like that's very unresponsive. Even though Namari threatens to take out anything, there's a lot of decks that just would have removal for it right away, and then you've done nothing essentially the whole game up until that point. So you're probably just losing, even if you after then start coming out with the answers. And even then, like you're going 4, 5, 6. So you're not coming out with an answer the following turn. Your answer is Tinkerbell, which is not great at that point. Probably it's just much better. You have to get to like 6 essentially. If you're going first, like sometimes you can miss and go like Kita and Amari plus tank into Hades, but you're so many turns behind of the 7 costs or threatening the 7 costs that it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Keto would ramp you on your 5 ink turn, right? So you would go to 7 the next turn if you're able to activate it instead of sinking. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
All right, let's take a look at this is more of a classic dogs deck. I mean, I know last Zach was on the podcast. He was like, "Dogs, bro, I hate this deck so much." So maybe it's a bit unfair to pass it over to you on this one. But the one thing it did gain, well, there's like 2 interesting things. Mainly, right, is kind of the Webby and this Scrooge card and the Raja too. I'd love to get your opinion on the Scrooge card in particular, though, Zach, because this is a card I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I've heard from some people that they actually really, really like it. I haven't tested it enough myself. Is it a card you've messed around with, or you're probably reading it for the first time?
I'm reading it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. I think I would probably rather play that Mowgli or whatever it's called.
Mowgli, yeah.
Mowgli. I think I'd probably rather play that in that spot. A card I am interested in is the Raja. Like, if you play Pluto, anyways, this doesn't play it, but like Pluto into Raja is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to think about. And then this Webby without the other. I guess this is playing the role of that Merryweather.
The fairy.
So it's fine.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's fine.
It's just standard dogs, right? There's not too much to say here.
Yeah,
right,
I think the most notable thing is that it was a deck that was not represented, and then it put 2 copies into the top 8 with 59 cards the same. The only difference is that one of the people was playing a third 3-cost lady instead of the 4th copy of Emerald's Chromacon. But yeah, it did like it super overperformed the amount of people that brought it. Just like Zach said, though, I am also surprised that it's not playing the Webby shift, because you already naturally want to play this Webby one. That's something we talked about when we were revealing the cards for the spoilers. But I think the Webby shift line, just like having the option to hit it, is so strong. And like the fact that it ramps you, it negates the downside of you like not going wide to reduce your Tramp 7. So, but obviously these guys did super well with it, so they must be doing something right.
Also, when like the top 2 decks, some of the top 2 decks in Meta are just Sapphire, so there's a very high chance that if you do the Shift Webby, you're really going to benefit off of it as well. But I do want to move on to the next deck, because this is a deck I want to cook. I've been like chewing the ear off Thiago all week of like talking about different types of builds, and very much like splitting between 2 different versions. So I saw a really cool build during Lorca Quest this weekend, which again was set 9 Fabled meta, but the biggest payoff cards it was getting off of the Circle of Life were, of course, the Surfer Stitch. The Clarabelle was playing the Tramps, and then was also playing like the Lady package in the form of 5-cost Lady and 1-cost Lady. I still like the idea of the 3-cost Lady too, because it kind of acts like what these 3-cost Singer 5s do, like the Aurora, which is kind of just like a bad card, but people just play it in this deck to basically go like 1-cost into 2-cost into Singer 5 Aurora. But what the Lady enables you to do is basically still establish a Singer 5 in a sense, but also make your board 1 slot wider for another Tramp discount. Lady's like best combos, like it kind of can depend of what you can fit in the deck, but I really like the Mowgli in here as well. I'm looking at like the specific build of this deck, and it's not too far off my version that I have cooked up. As you mentioned, Zach, the Pluto into Raja is so incredibly strong, especially against like the kind of mid-rangey decks, and can be okay against some aggro decks if you want to just get out the Raja as a bit of a body. But why I like Pluto into Raja, and then if the Pluto survives, which is quite likely unless we see something like a Fire the Cannons, into Pluto activation to play the Mickey Mouse Amber Champion, is you've got all of these buffed up Sapphire characters, or Amber characters, and then the Mickey part triggers, and then as soon as you maybe after that can play a Bobby or discard, or like you just start to play Tramp stuff, then this Mickey being active is so incredibly huge. It doesn't rely on the fact that you have to play all of these like Singer cards. Like Mickey is like the whole Singer package in one, and then it just allows you to play all of these like basically ramp cards, but it's just character ramp in the form of Pluto in the form of Huey. So for me, I think this is kind of another version of like what I would consider kind of a core build. Most people are still running 4 copies of Philip, 4 copies of Malicious, Mean, and Scary. Scar numbers are going up and down. The 3-cost shift line Prince Philip numbers are going up and down. Like, I think Thiago, last time we looked at my list, like I think I had something like 2 of the Scar and something like 4 ladies in place of the Prince Philip. Again, I haven't done too much extensive testing with the ladies, but like I said, I do still like the idea of being able to go like lady plus Ursula or lady plus Mowgli, or even lady plus Huey really isn't that bad. So I really, 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 really like this deck. I think it helps, like the fact that the Malicious, Mean, and Scary and Prince Philip combos in here is something that you can kind of repeat a couple of times. And what's even really interesting is if like once the Prince Philip comes out, if they like really struggle to remove it, but then once they do remove it, all you could really have to do is just draw into another Malicious, Mean, and Scary in another circle, and then you can just replay it. Like, you don't have to find a second Philip to then discard it to then do the combo. Like, if they somehow are able to deal with it, then that's kind of just refueling your combo for you already, which is quite interesting. But yeah, I'd love to pass this over to you, Thiago, and then maybe pass it over to Zach to hear your thoughts. But I know this is something that you've liked the idea of, I believe, Thiago, so far.
Yeah, I think this like Pluto, Raja, Huey, Mickey Mouse, Amber Champion package is just super strong. Like them all bodyguarding each other, and then the Mickey Mouse like giving the ramp guys extra health to make them resilient so that they survive another turn to be able to activate again is super strong. One of the cards that I have actually been seeing people kind of putting in and out of the deck list is Clarabelle. So before we throw it over, can you just like quickly talk about the role of Clarabelle in the deck and like how you see her? And
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Yeah. I think Clarabelle is a card that I'm seeing kind of find its way in and out for a couple of different options. When I've been playing this deck, for the most part, the Clarabelle honestly has never felt very impactful. And then even that's the same thing I was mentioning to you of like, okay, if the Clarabelle hasn't been felt that impactful, then even all of these 1-cost Claras, like you're trying to play it for the shift line, but I feel like I'm never going into playing this deck saying, oh, I want to do Clarabelle shift into some ramp stuff. Like, I think the difference is like that is actually an opener you can do. You can just do like Pluto into, I don't know, like Huey, and then somehow, as long as you have your shift Clarabelle, you can like really like shift Clarabelle really, really early. But I think that's an opener you have to recognize, and then maybe some people are like, I just don't want to go for that opener at all. I just want to go for like my Giga circle turn, make my board as wide as possible, go for my tramp. So in theory, it makes sense why it is still in the deck, because it should be this alternative opener that helps you out. But also, I've been hearing against certain decks, it's not often that they have a gigantic number of cards in their hand very efficiently, and then this deck doesn't have anything like You're Welcome. You're not able to fuel their hand at all, so you're super reliant on just them having enough cards that you actually get an advantage out of this Clarabelle. With the 7-cost tramp, you are able to discard your hand down pretty efficiently, so in a sense, even if the Clarabelle is only drawing you 2 or 3 cards, it should be fine in theory. But then again, like, you're also playing some anti-synergistic stuff when you're playing Mowgli's, you're playing Ursula's. It is putting your opponent down 1 card, but these cards are very, very necessary in order to answer if you're playing a mirror match of this, or if you're playing against green blue where you need to snipe. They're Under the Sea. Like this deck, by the way, falls incredibly hard to Under the Sea. I think with the Prince Philip and the Raja, it helps out a lot. If you're playing the full Singer version with like the Ursula Vanessa and the Auroras, like if you see a single Under the Sea, you just lose the game. You literally just lose the game. Spooky side against a deck like this is actually not as bad, because it can ramp you into some of your bigger cards, but it's still not that great. You constantly want to have a wide board to take advantage of your 7-cost tramp. So I can see the Clarabelle maybe making its way in and out potentially. But Zach, I'd love to pass it over to you, because I know you've liked green yellow in the past. I know it's a very different deck, but yeah, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of this a lot. There's a lot of questions I would need answered with testing. Like Clarabelle was the first thing I was looking at. Like, how impactful is it actually not ramping into it. I mean, you have the Pluto and stuff, but yeah, how impactful is it actually? And then because like if you're playing one drop Clarabelle, that card blows. And then also like Tramp 7, you don't have 21 drops or whatever. Obviously, you still want the card. It's an amazing singer. He's still great, but like he also doesn't work super well. We don't have so many one drops. I love the idea of the Mickey Mouse. You also have to be careful with a card like that, to where it's doing nothing when it comes into play. But I think, yeah, it obviously makes sense. Singer 8 for the Circle of Life. So I love the idea. I would just need to test it and see if I need to adjust anything, because a lot of stuff kind of clashes. So I'll just have to see.
Yep. I think there are a lot of versions you can build of this in a lot of different directions. So I would be curious. Again, this is another deck to keep an eye on to see how it evolves. Something interesting to note about the Mowgli, I think, Sky, you might have mentioned it when you talked about it in Amber Steel. Very, very niche scenario that comes up. You never really want to be playing Mowgli on 2. Like, you'd much rather, again, be doing like Pluto Raja opener, or at least establishing something like a Huey. But there is the potential, if you're against the blue deck, that if you play Mowgli on the play, you could snipe their only ramp spell if it's something like a Sail, which could completely set them back an entire turn. So that's just something to note, to say, like, if my hand isn't that good and I feel like I kind of have to play Mowgli on 2 on the play, like, it might not be the worst against something like a blue deck. But Mowgli in general has been a card I've really liked. I like a 2 count in my deck as well. It's not like something I feel like I need to play 4 of, but like when it comes up at a certain situation, it most of the time should just be putting my opponent down a card, and if it's uninkable, it's a high impact card that they need, and if it's inkable, I'm just getting rid of a card they would have resourced. So yeah, overall, really like the idea of this deck, and I'm curious to see how it's going to evolve over the next few weeks. Thiago, okay, this is one of the last decks I think that we have. It's going to be a green purple deck, and honestly, this is the first time I'm seeing anything like this. I haven't dived deep into green purple. That is playing the Prince Philip combo as well, is doing Webby shifts, is playing like this Flynn Rider. So if you could break this down for us, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, so this is a green purple deck that's kind of a mix between like the Cusco shift Amethyst Chromacon decks that are trying to win the game with Bend, and the like more tempo-y green purple decks. Certainly more closer to the tempo-y green purple decks, but you're still trying to get big and utilize this Prince Philip combo as well as You're Welcome. These cards, You're Welcome and Mother Knows Best, are very well positioned into a lot of the cards in this meta, because people are playing these really, really big cards like Vincenzo and Hades and all of these kinds of things that they're using these huge ink investments in. So then if you're able to deal with it with a song that costs you 0 ink, that is extremely efficient. And then against the decks that are playing gargoyles, you can also have these really high tempo turns where you're getting rid of one of their big cards and freezing the other one with the Stone by Day ability. So it's really making the most out of that. Obviously, this list is very unique. It is most special. This also is definitely not 60 cards. Maybe somebody can maybe.
Oh
yeah,
no, we're showing an over 60 card deck on Podcana.
Yeah, so
Thiago, what have we done?
Crazy. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Mo's an incredible player.
Yeah.
He's done very well with this color combination before. I think this deck really makes the most out of the Webby shift, because you're really trying to get into high ink amounts and you're drawing a lot of cards, so you're really able to take advantage of having a lot of ink to have these really, really high velocity turns where you're able to play a lot of cards that are all efficient for their ink totals. And yeah, we see a bunch of cards that we don't typically see, like this 2-cost Thiago and this 1-cost Flynn Rider, which are able to really slow down the opponent's plan. And then cards like this Flynn Rider are really good at being able to turn the corner as soon as you have the initiative in the game.
Go ahead, Zach, if you're going to say something.
Elephant like super sticks out to me. It's like he was looking at the list, and this list is bad against purple steel, and let's just plop some elephants in there and hope for the best. So I definitely like to talk to him, see what his idea behind elephant was, because that's the only thing I can think of. Like, let's just patch the purple steel problem a little bit with a big 3/7 guy, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's also nice. It does have some synergy of some stuff that you want to be bouncing, like bouncing something like a go-go at times can be kind of nice. So like the effect of it is nice. But I think I agree. It's a very, very effective body against Amethyst Steel. Just looking at this deck and just like thinking about the webby stuff, I just remembered a card that our Amber Emerald player was playing in the Set 9 Fabled CCQ this past weekend. It was like a single copy of the 3-cost Hey Hey that can ramp you in Emerald, and I find like that card quite interesting as like maybe a one or two of even in the existing build we saw for the Amber Emerald deck, because if it's a one or two of, that could help you out a little bit if you're still going for your Clarabelle opener potentially, right? Like you just play Clarabelle, or even if you do like Pluto into if you're on the draw, you can do Pluto into the Hey Hey to ramp yourself a little bit, and then maybe spam a few one drops, do some shifts. So that's another card that I'm genuinely curious about people including, even if it is just a one or two of. Like, what's your thoughts on that card versus the Webby, maybe, Thiago, if you could speak about it?
Yeah, I think that the main difference is that the Webby is like a super efficient threatening body, whereas the Hey Hey is not. Like, it comes in and then half the times, like if you're on the draw, then it'll have its effect and it'll be okay. But the Webby is like establishing a threat that's warded, that quests for a lot very early, has high willpower, and then is threatening to repeat its effect every single turn. Like a lot of the blue decks, especially with Cinderella, are trying to ramp multiple times, so she repeats her effect over and over again. And I mean, sometimes this Webby is literally questing for like 8, 10, 12 against these decks just because they don't attack the board super efficiently early. So I think the Webby is like super strong, and I think the ramping aspect of Webby is certainly huge, but it's the entirety of the reason why you would play a card like Hey Hey, and it's just part of the equation as to why you'd play
Sure.
Webby. But I know Sky was at this tournament, and was Mo terrorizing people with this deck? What do you think?
Yeah, I spoke to him a little bit afterwards. I assumed he was on Green Purple, but I didn't get to see like any of his games or anything. But he made top cut with it. I think I saw him buying a bunch of blinged out Webbies afterwards at the Epic, and he was like debating the two enchantments in the case. So I'm gonna assume he has a lot of faith in the deck, at least in Webby, the card itself. But yeah, I think he was doing very well, and I watched him play versus Gabe, the guy who made the dogs list in the Circle of Life before, and I think they had like a really close top cut match. But yeah, I like this deck. I think it's probably the best Webby deck. Like, I don't think Webby is that great in green blue. Maybe it's enough if like the mirror is a thing, but I think this deck seems super solid. It's probably the deck that I don't know what happens like most of the turns out of all the decks in the current meta. Like, I can see the first few turns, but then like after that, it kind of feels like it's just like a choose your own adventure type of thing. A lot of it's dependent on if you had Webby ship, if you had that extra ramp. Because there's like a lot of most decks like that have any ramp and they don't really have options for if they miss ramp, but this one definitely does because it's not as reliant. So it's kind of interesting. I'd be interested to see how the games play out for this, because it is a deck that can go the distance, but it's also not really built like it's a deck that can go to the distance. Like it's just filled with a bunch of characters, and like you're eventually going to get to enough ink to do like expensive stuff with Prince Philip and Malicious Means Carry. So I don't know. I'd have to test it against Blue Steel. I'd be curious to see how that matchup would go.
Seems super fun indeed. I think the final deck we have to cover, Kim will be very happy. Kim is actually the person who's been bugging Thiago the most about this deck. So I feel like it was one of our episodes, maybe it was last week or the week before, we spent like what I felt like was 20 minutes talking about why Amber Sapphire can't work or probably shouldn't work, because it lacks card draw, it lacks removal, it lacks all of these different things. So, Thiago, I'm assuming if you've refined this and built this is probably like your like one of your best efforts you could do to saying like if there's any hope that the deck has, it's probably this. So, yeah, talk to me about blue yellow princesses.
Yeah, so over the past couple weeks when we've been showing deck lists, I've been getting many angry DMs that we haven't shown a princess deck. So this week I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play a bunch of games, and I'm going to give the people a princess deck. And then like it started just being like this silly, like, oh, I'm going to put these princess cards in and whatever. And then like the deck ended up like being really good. I played 11 games and went 9-2. Like it was like completely serviceable. And like the deck was doing like so much powerful things. Like it was so fun and like so much harder than I had like thought it would be when I like built it. There's like so many crazy lines where you're going like, with all these like Auroras and Ramp cards and stuff. So you'd go like Aurora into Ramp, and then you'd go like Cindy, and then since you discounted her with Aurora, you don't have to ink that turn. I was going like Aurora, and then you can go like Tipo on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you can go like Sail, ink 2 cards, activate Aurora, play Cinderella, and then you just have 7 inks the next turn, so you can play like Surfer Stitch or something. I think World's Greatest Criminal Mind is like obviously super good with all these support cards where you can support the opponent's card and then use World's Greatest Criminal Mind to take out anything you want. But just on its own, it's taking out very important cards in the meta like Goliath and Demona and Prince Philip and Clarabelle. Like this deck is also able to go like you play a 1-cost character and you ramp on turn 2, and then you play Cindy on turn 3, and usually you'd go into 6 ink on the next turn, but you can just like play the 5-cost Mulan and then not ink for turn, and then the Cindy inks a card, and then the next turn you have 7 ink. And then this 2-cost Rapunzel with all these support effects just gives you like really, really crazy lines where like you can support something, give it a shield with Rapunzel, and then that card can quest and support something else, and then the support like compounded from the previous character's support buff. You can do so much silly things with like Aurora into Sail Aurora into like Sail Mulan into Surfer Stitch the next turn, and yeah, it was like I was playing against like Purple Steel and dominating it. I was playing against Blurple and dominating it. I like played against Blue Steel and beat it every time. It was like I went 1-1 against Blue Green, I think, and then 1-1 against like Blue Red, which like yeah thing, and then everything else I just beat. It was like so much fun. And so here's the Princess deck. If you want the Princess deck, you got the Princess deck. I think I could legitimately win a set champ. That's like the level that I think the deck is. Like
Okay.
I think if you play very well, you can win a set champs with this deck. So yeah.
It's in a good position then for as we get some things in the next meta potentially, right? Like we've seen the Angel. I don't know if World's Greatest Criminal Mind is the song we want to be just pairing with Angel. That's going to make this deck so busted. But if we get a couple of really, really, really good 3-cost songs, and a lot of the stuff that's in this deck already, like you said, Thiago, is just good. Like Surfer Stitch is just good. Hades is just good. How much you're able to ramp is good. The protection you're getting from the Rapunzel is good. I think if we get a little bit more card drop, some good 3-cost songs, we could really see Amber Sapphire have a place within the meta. So I'm excited as we move into Winter Spell. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this week's episode. I want to say thank you to everybody for coming on the pod, because I think this is our first official pod with all 4 of us on, which is really cool to see. I'm glad that everyone's been enjoying the content over the past few weeks. I think we've got a stellar crew. It's been so much fun to hang out with these guys at events, and then also get to chat to them week to week about everything Disney, Lorcana. So wishing everybody, good luck with opening your packs if you want to get the legendaries. If you're as lucky as Sky over here getting his Cinderellas and Goliaths and everything. I opened 2 cases.
No enchanteds, but you open the good legendary.
Yeah,
like you pick.
That is
I don't know, probably not.
That is the trade-off. I opened 8 boxes too, and I got 0 Goliath, but I did get 3 enchanteds. So I'll take my enchanteds where I can get them.
Yeah, I take that.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this week's episode. If you guys enjoyed it, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @ZachBivens1, @ThiagoXS23, @SkyLorcana, and @Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.